Good afternoon from lovely Udaipur, Rajasthan, India. We are so happy that you could join us. How is everyone today?
Good afternoon to our beautiful Starseed family. As always, we send our love and blessings to all who are tuning in for another webinar from us. We are staying at the spacious, lush, green Anata Udaipur Resort and Spa. The landscaping is very well designed and maintained. The property has amazing recreational areas with huge rooms. Our room has a spectacular view of the Aravalli Mountains. The staff is very courteous, friendly and hospitable. Their rooftop restaurant is awesome, where you can enjoy dinner with a nice view of the Sajangar Palace and mountains. The food is delicious.
Thank you for viewing our psychic webinar on finding your truth as a psychic and not as just a human being in a living play. Living your truth is one thing. Perceiving or witnessing truth is a whole another ball of wax. And that's what we're talking about. It's like seeing through to the guttural truth about yourself in relation to another, or in relation to some circumstance that's going on within your world. And in seeing down to the truth, you can take an action internal to yourself to change the circumstance within. As you change the circumstance within, then it relays without, and it changes the circumstance with others. So that's what perceiving psychic truth is all about. Now we have this little scene here, which is a picture of a lily pond in Udaipur, Rajasthan. The flowers may not have started to bloom yet, but the leaves are coming up out of the water, and the lily pond say to Asur'Ana, "A student in your Dreamtime Ascension School, or DAS, Chi needs to see down to the truth about something she's not really willing to look at. And it has to do with her relationship to Ross. It's not about Chi not caring and swaying and being there for Ross, but the truth is that he's getting sick, and there will come a point, perhaps, in his own sickness, that she can't be with him anymore because the sickness takes her away from her spiritual truth. Why is that so? Well, disease is a wobble. It's a wobble in the DNA, and it's a wobble sometimes on the sick and dying parts of the planet. In Asur'Ana and Pair's global travel, they had driven to many national parks. Some parts of the park didn't look well because of maybe former forest fires that had burned all the trees down, or something else about it didn't feel well in Asur'Ana's body either. So these parts of the park are sick and dying, similar to those regions of the planet that are also sick and dying, whereas other regions of the planet are ascending or flourishing. Then they drove to other regions that felt absolutely stunningly beautiful, and in these regions they parked and walked around a bit and took pictures. But anyway, wherever it is, we really want to share that sometimes in the delusion of our lives, we fail to see something about those that we are intimate with. The whole point of psychic perception is to get under the veils of delusion or the veils of illusion, and then see down to the truth of what is so, and then the truth of what action you need to take or speak or say in order to correct the circumstance, so that you can stay in your truth as a living human. And that's the purpose of psychic truth systems. Now, psychic truth systems look at veils of illusion, and veils of illusion come in 4 formats. And when we go into our meditation, we'll look at that in relation to your current life or life disturbances. They come in the form of programming. Programming are cause and effect beads that line up a particular behavior or circumstance in you or others. Cause and effect beads come generally from the ontology that can also be related to social programming. So in social programming, there is cause and effect, and it creates circumstances that sometimes align very well for people and sometimes don't align at all. The cause and effect beads can be erased, and there's a particular way that erase cause and effect beads. You can erase them in yourself and any other people that you're having a quandary about, and let it go to another circumstance of a castaneated dream that allows for a kind alliance, or a kind understanding, or a kinder way to go about your own circumstance. Program beads are easily seen once you know what you're looking at, and sometimes they have to be identified as the actual program that's running in the field. Sometimes not. Sometimes you just see it inside the field of another if you're gifted at looking at things, and then can choose to remove it in them and in you, because you will have a parallel program in you that is related because you're disturbed in some manner. That's known as deprogramming. And as you deprogram, some other stream comes in that brings in a kinder alliance or a more illuminated stance in which you can do something else in your life, and they can too in relation to you or something else. So deprogramming was something that Asur'Ana learned a long time ago, going back 25 years in Berkeley Psychic Institute or BPI studies, and she would remove it endlessly in herself and in others. Programming, when it abates, can sometimes cause change, or it will realign the circumstance to be an alliance that works better for people. Programming is related to emotional charge. So people who's been in judgment or resentment or anger or some kind of behavioral pattern that's negative have a negative program that is engaging and causing them to behave that way. And if it's erased, then their behavior changes. And for you, you react to their behavior because you have a program in relation to it. And when you erase that, you cease to react, and life goes back more into a state of peace. Those that studied with Berkeley Psychic Institute became very gifted at modulating the world by releasing programming in them and others around them that was negative or charged in a way that made behavior very incongruent or difficult to be near. That's something you can learn to do too. And as we go into meditation, you will begin to understand this a little bit more of how it's constructed and how to remove. It's not difficult, it's just focus. And even if you can't see it, you can still choose to say, we're going to release this programming and erase it and let it go away. Then see how you feel within. If it changes your feeling within, and see how you react to another, how they react to you, and see if the negativity goes away and there's a more positive stance, okay, in life for both of you or for whoever's involved in the ordeal you're experiencing. So that's about programming. Programming is just cause and effect of every time an ancestor felt the same way. That's all it really is. And something about the current society doesn't really release their past very well, either in life or in their own ancestries. It's like the past clings to them and recreates itself over and over again. You free up the programming and something new can happen for them and for you too. Then there's societal programming, and we've had to diffuse that because you're in a society of C's and you're integrating another program that starts the systems. We'll look at that too from a psychic clause of what do you need to release today of the societal programming to integrate your C programming instead. C programming is very nurturing. It's very honorable. It wants you to be in your truth and each to find their truth. It wants a statement of peace of all and oneness with the whole, and that's the main focus of seed programming. It is very different than a societal programming which is polarized between guilt and shame and honor and truth. So truth is about truth, and if you're not in truth, you're guilty of something. Honor is honor, and if you don't honor, then there's shame. That's a very weird concept to associate with. Something that is true to star seeds, because for you, honor doesn't equate to shame, and truth doesn't equate to guilt. And so that's the way society runs. If you're honorable, then you're not ashamed of something. And if you're truth, then you're not guilty of something. That's very weird concepts, and people run around in that kind of programming. It makes them unbelievably difficult inside themselves, sometimes with issues that leave them in shame, or guilt, or despondency, or dejection, or something like that. It's all a program, and if they erase it, they'll feel better, and if they integrate the opposite, they feel a whole lot better about life. That's where the work of BPI took flight everywhere, because people found that it worked to change their reality or change the way that they related to the world. And so we blessed the founder of BPI, who's long dead now of cancer, but he was a very Tao-ordained human. He was a seed too, and he started a system of something that worked for people, and some of what we're introducing you to comes from Louis Bostwick, who was the original founder of Berkeley Psychic Institute. He wanted a reality where people could become aware of their internal truth, and he created a system with his Tao and many Taos that worked for this society, in addition to seeds who may have spawned into his work, such as Asur'Ana. Therefore, we always honor where things come from, because we're bringing in a system that originated with him, that Asur'Ana transcribed into seed systems for you to work with. It's a very unusual system because it allows you to allow programming to go that's negative or doesn't work for you, that may have gotten intertwined with you, and let it go in the people around you to cause something new and unusual to arise that makes you and everybody else happier, and you can sing together more. That's what Bostwick would say to his students at that time. You sing more if you can understand how to let go of your negative program. They did, and I did too, in that time period of my life. I learned how to navigate it and get rid of negative experiences from childhood, and let go of a lot of things that didn't work for me through time, so I could grow in my own way to be a teacher or leader of similar work. And so that's what I want to share with you with seeds. This is a seed system of psychic awareness that is transcribed from something Bostwick did for himself as a star seed. It's pretty cool to offer you this, and I bless him. So anyway, here's what we can say about social programming. It links into your foundry. Social programming that's positive for your foundry in your life tethers you into work that works for you. You don't want to touch or you lose your job. If you're job changing or searching for a job, which some of you are, then you're going to find a link to your foundry for social programming to carry you up to the new destination for your next job, and you don't release the current programming for your current job until the new job formats into your life, and we'll speak to that too. The same is true for what keeps you in a marriage or what takes you out of a marriage. If you want to stay in a marriage, you don't release the social programming for the marriage. If you want to leave the marriage, you release the social programming for the marriage, and you may want to find a twin or someone new, and then you plug that in and know that when you release, it's going to create a major life change. So you don't want to do it until it's time or you're ready actually to face that change and mold it up in a new direction. Programming can be better in the foundry for new social programming that align to new jobs or careers or things you would like to experiment with in your life, and that's an area that you don't touch. You go to salsa dreaming about it or your Tao, and you let them rearrange it, okay? There are gears and there are things in it that you don't understand, that social programming plugs into your foundry and is where it's supposed to be, because you don't want it in the body because it will injure the body to have social programming engage with your molecule. So we'll look at it from a molecular level and not a foundry level. If you find social programming in your molecules, you're going to move it down to your foundry and discharge what's not right and go about it that way. If you have aches and pains in your body, it may be related to social programming breaching into your molecules, which it can if you transfuse as a star seed. So we'll look at that. The third area of programming that you can be aware of has to do with your cortex. Your cortex is a program all its own in its circuitry of synapses and everything else. It goes the way that it goes in your mind stream due to the synapse formation and the programming of the cortex that seeks to understand and know. To please people if you're a people pleaser, or try to find a match with people so that it works out with them and you. To find a sway with people or find kindness with people so that you can share your life a little bit more with people, and that's good programming for the cortex. Sometimes there's negative programming where you feel depressed, so a certain sequence goes off in the mind and now you feel depressed, or you feel in judgment of someone, or you're experiencing something negative. Negative cortex programming can be erased or rearranged with the Taos that are coming in to help you with this. And Sosa has a mind program that's pretty astute about life wave mind. We're going to speak to that some today about negativity, negative words, negative airstream, and negative possibilities that then form as streams you could stream out of, in that can be erased and released to the winds of time, so that you can be more positive about everything you think, say, do, speak, act, or action in your life. Sometimes there's negative programming where you feel depressed, so a certain sequence goes off in the mind and now you feel depressed. Or you feel in judgment of someone, or you're experiencing something negative. Negative cortex programming can be erased or rearranged with the Taos that are coming in to help you with this. And Sosa has a mind program that's pretty astute about light wave mind. We're going to speak to that some today about negativity, negative words, negative airstream, and negative possibilities that then form as streams you could stream out of it, that can be erased and released to the winds of time, so that you can be more positive about everything you think, say, do, speak, act, or action in your life. Positive creates positive in light wave motion. You probably heard that thought that you have to be positive, and if you're positive, you don't draw negativity, negative entities, negative airstream, or something to you. In light, it's even more direct, because if you're negative, it's negative. It shows up as a negative something that hits you between the eyebrows of your mind. And you don't want to create those or call those kinds of circumstances to you ever. And so we'll speak to that too. The last thing we can tell you about truth is a program of you too, and that the truth of you is sincere when the program comes from your seed and not some other systems that you've adopted through time. Some go to the metaphysical marketplace and read books and do meditations and do all these things and reprogram themselves for spiritual truth and spiritual path. Perhaps they go to this workshop or that workshop, or this retreat or that retreat. Or many of you came to retreats of ours to time in DAS. We did reprogram you, not pair or I per se, but spirit, to be on a path of truth in light wave synergy. Light wave synergy is a light wave motion that speaks and expresses and creates in sublime notion of light in divinity. And divinity is really a notion of love. A notion of love of all in the expression of light. Is that you learn to love all and you cease to be negative about anything, because everything has a purpose and a place and a truth to do whatever it does. And it's not your life, and it's not you, it's them. And you let go of that guilt or shame or whatever it is you think you've caused, or whatever it is that's there that they want to press on you that just isn't so. And then you stand in your truth. That's a Babaji theory of truth, and starseed truth is more gracious than that, okay? A starseed has a truth to create, express, love, care, find partnership, and be creative with the endeavors that you touch through time. And be creative in the kitchen, creative in your home, creative with people, creative with nature and how you experience nature, and creative in whatever you foster in terms of your career or your life map of career. Is a creativity that is missing in the truth of the system of Babaji or of the social programming of humanity that makes it difficult on starseeds. Now Babaji and Baba are Egyptian light systems that reopened up, and now they're being replaced by Sosa light systems, because Sosa is more adroitly nemesis oriented and more able to deal with the mindset of humanity than Babaji systems. So it's a time of transition into Sosa that has a lot of information on light wave society systems that are needed by the current oligarchy society. Starseeds need starseed light systems and not necessarily Sosa, meaning that you need both. So we're going to reorganize you some to be both in Sosa and in starseed light wave stream and programs of the starseed that are related to truth and honor and even divine expression, where you can express the love you may feel for others or for something else, and that's really, really beautiful to foster. Now we're going to go into our meditation now. So please get comfortable, alright? And we're going to have you look inward as always and have you understand that this word of yours is yours to foster. You're like an oyster that's about to open up into other parts of you and find out and discover your own pearl. Pearls are gifts of starseeds for love, wisdom, understanding, beauty, grace, care, and sway. That's the pearl in the oyster for each starseed present for this meditation. Let's sit back and close your eyes. If you have nice music playing, that's nice, or if you want to turn some on now to soothe you, that's very, very nice to have in the background. I'm going to have you take a deep breath and relax into the sway of a swing of a resource of Sosa that will sway your void. Now, in some cases, your void may have been replaced last night or prior to this webinar, and void can get crusty or get injured or get nipped in the airstream of humanity. And when we replace void, it grows into a luminescent green. And so we're going to have you look at your void now and highlight where there's still nicks or something in it that looks black or dark, and let it be drawn out and replaced with Sosa instruments today. The void is an area you need to look at probably once a week and attune to Sosa and have it removed if it's ill. There are time periods to replace the entire void, and that happens about once a year. Most of you have had a void replacement already in relation to Sosa, and so today you're just looking at where the void is not well, and if you can't really see it in your mind's eye, you still know it in the body. So highlight it and will help remove it or chip it out and give you a new segment of void that allows you to feel more peaceful as you transfuse in light. As you transfuse in light, and if you've got a lot of sick void, it can be very uncomfortable in the body. We know that, and most of you have had a void replacement with Babaji within the last year. So you weren't bad, but we wanted to tune it up today because clear void and luminescent green void causes you to see you easier what it is you're looking at within yourself or within others. Now, a few of you received white void due to your frequent participation in DAS. If you do, white void will remain there, and so we'll repair it as white void. We don't give white void unless you have phosphorus light in your body. We gave those dedicated to their spiritual path a phosphorus bath, so your void is going to look white, and don't replace it with green ever. It should be replaced with white void if that's so, and that holds the phosphorus around the body to syncopate its healing and its vision too. It's a major gift that's very beautiful for starseeds. We're going to look inward at your field and at the molecules first. So on your screen in your mind, you zoom up the molecules of the whole body, and we're going to focus upon where there is programming suspended inside the molecular structure. Asur'Ana used to throw a color on it to see where the programs were lodged, and she used to use blue, and I think that's a good color to throw at your molecules to see where the programming is lodged. Now, if it's intertwined all over your body, then you're triggered to release a lot of things, okay? And if you are, that's because of a class you took on programming in the last week leading up to this webinar. There are Dreamtime classes leading up to this webinar. Therefore, if you've got blue dots everywhere, don't be alarmed. It's just the way that it is because you're wanting to release as much program as you can, given what we're talking about, and what's highlighted is negative programming. A negative programming can be societal. So we'll have you throw a red at what's societal, and what's blue is more personal, related to your DNA or the people that you're surrounded with, or the work that you foster, or things that get programmed into you through teachers or others in your life stream. People do program each other. It's important to realize that as you go to work each day. Somebody may be gifted at programming you into something you don't really want to participate in as an emotional charge, and you want to remove that if you can. That's a very useful thing to understand, is that you want to deprogram yourself every week. Anything else that somebody may have laced into your molecular infrastructure. Now there's a sequence on how programming comes in, and there's an emotional charge that goes along with it. And this is up now, but you can think about the emotional traumas maybe in your childhood. Usually, programming is related to some emotional system of parents or siblings or even teachers in school that have come along and they have laid something in. Sometimes a scene will pop up in relation to where this type of programming began or started in this infrastructure of life of you. Whatever scene that is, you can examine it and then go back to that circumstance where your brother spit up on you, or your mother hits you, or you fell out of your high chair, or something else that happened at school, or something else that happened even in teenage or adult years. Programming is insidious in its need to be there on a basis of emotional charge. And so what happens a lot of time when it's laid in is there's a slime of some emotional charge that hits you. So you're running around work and suddenly somebody says something very derogatory to you, and suddenly you feel highly ashamed and know that it's triggered a program. And if they're a programming type of person, perhaps they're trying to lay a program of shame in on you on top of it. That's a sincere manner that people relate in the society as they program each other, sometimes with negative things and negative remarks. The most negative people that really stir up emotional charges are often very gifted in programming people into negativity. That's what one initiate, Wendy, witnessed with her mother. She was just always derogatory, couldn't say anything positive, didn't like the way she dressed or walked or did her makeup or anything. It was always negative, and every time it stirred up a charge in Wendy as she received a program from her mother to be negative inside herself. For those of you that feel negative inside yourself, may have had a mother like that, or a grandmother like that, or father or grandfather that was just hyper negative. And if they were, then you know that's the basis of shame or negativity that you may still have within yourself on some level that you need to discharge. So if that's so, it's very simple. You bring forward the programming that may be based on shame or guilt from something that may have originated in your childhood, and you erase the first bead and the last bead, and the whole chain dissipates. And that's how that works. Some of you may not have shame programming or guilt programming because you have another kind of problem called anger or outrage or feeling abused. So pull those programs forward if they're highlighted at all, and erase the first and the last bead and allow it to dissipate. Okay? Most childhood programming with some kind of negativity begins there. If you've had a more positive family, you may or may not have this programming, but others may have laid it into you anyway through time, including teachers or people of authority in your life. Sometimes even friends will trigger something really deep and lead to a program that shows up from them in youth or teenage years or even young adult years. Then there's schooling that's university-oriented. They can lay programming in to study or to be well with their education program. And that's usually different from programming that's social or emotional, and we'll get to that in a minute. But free yourself up now of any emotional charge. Bring each layer forward and erasing the first and the last bead. First and the last bead. First and the last bead until it starts to fall apart. Now, in the Shatar days of Ascension, programming was released by Shatar. So if you don't have much of this kind of programming, you may have had Shatar release it for you because he didn't want people to get into the details of Ascension because he felt it wasn't really necessary. And he designed a device because people got programmed in similar categories around a wheel of a clock. He put people in it that came to our Dreamtime events and let them dissipate their emotional negativity in the programs of their childhood and youth and work and all that stuff. And if you receive that treatment, much of this may be gone. But if you have new programs, that's because somebody else motions something else in you and programmed you maybe with a pattern that was a charge of your youth or your teenage years. That can happen even after his system because people would come to DAS events and have to dissipate more programming that came in over that 6-month or 1-year period, and that would always surprise us that he said, "We've got rid of all this once. Why don't you just keep staying out of it? That just speaks to how many people program each other in the polarities that they hold. Well, I'm going to be positive and you're going to be negative. I'm going to know everything and you're not. I'm going to be beautiful and you're not. I'm going to be wonderful and you're not. I'm going to be sick, not, and you're going to be sick. And it goes around the wheel of disturbances in the oligarchy society. So even though you take this out today, you may find more next week after people that you've gone to work with or interplay with on some level just have to stick you with something that you didn't really want to ever experience again. It is kind of insidious, and in light it can vaporize like as you run light through the molecules you can vaporize program. But I would say that if you see these bees of cause and effect, this is another level of patterning that perhaps you never got to in your ascension days, because patterning tends to repeat. So if you had it in childhood at the base of who you were at that time you were born, and then your parents added it to you and you finally released it through ascension, now it's showing up in light wave programming. So what you're looking at is light wave programming, and not what Shatar may have done to about 50,000 ascending initiates, which were you as star seeds. He was very gifted with many things, and we can bless him too, but he's not with us anymore because he was never devised to motion light, which is why Sosa dreaming is here now. Sosa means star systems, so that's kind of nice, and this society is researching Egyptian motions of light to see if they can implement them and make it easier on everybody. So let's take out all the negative light wave programming that may be linked to your molecules, and if it intertwines with social programming, you see a system outside of the molecules connecting into the bees of cause and effect. So we're going to bring forward now bees of cause and effect related to social programming. Social programming is very complex, has to do with longitudes and latitudes, a polarity of the neighborhood, of the business you're a part of, and of society at large. Society for you is maybe within about 30-mile radius today. So that's your societal infrastructure, because in Sosa, they don't cluster them by state or by nation because it's too hard to modulate. So for Sosa, your 30-mile radius is your society, and that's easier for you because otherwise there'll be way too many people polarizing against you as a star seed, because you're one of a few in the society of 30 miles. You may be the only one, and in a way that's better for you because the others are only who they are and where they're at and whatever they're doing, and they don't conflict with your transfusion or light wave motion very much. And that's what originated this system, was how do we protect the starseeds from like a societal crush of polarity if you're up against perhaps 1 million people. Usually within 30 miles, and even if it is a little dense, you have perhaps 100,000 that you're dealing with in population, perhaps a little less. Mostly it's about 30 to 40,000 inhabitants in every 30-mile ring, and that isn't enough to crush you as a star seed in social programming that could really injure your infrastructure otherwise. Now that more people are transfusing, or more people are motioning light. So understand that's why it is laced this way, because people do transfuse together, and you may be the only star seed in that circle, or you may be one of maybe 4, the max is 4, in some circles, and that may be related to just where star seeds planted their lives. But generally speaking, you're the only one, and so the social programming does come in from this 30-mile radius. Now, if you work outside of 30 miles, then we incorporated another ring for where you work. If you travel, that's a whole other story. And don't worry about that, because those rings aren't going to affect you at all, because you're just in transit. So if the office is far away, there's another ring of 30 miles from when you go there, and for at home is a 30-mile ring too, and everything else is only transit. Social programming can come into you at school too. So if you're at school or attending classes, there may be another 30-mile ring if work is outside of that. If you're at school and at home, then you're in that ring of the university or the campus or wherever you're going to school. When you do webinars, it's in your own societal dream. So it doesn't have anything to do with wherever the teacher is or whatever you're listening to online. And so we'll speak to that too, because that's a major way to learn something, but the healing may or may not occur unless it's organized. Asur'Ana and Pair and their Dao and Tao have organized your healing through SOSA in these webinars. We have participated in it some in relation to the Tao that was fostering the other webinars, but we're taking a lead now as a group of resources for you to be better in your lives with what you're learning, and learn how to apply it differently if you need to in relation to people that you know. And we haven't even gone into the people that you know right now. But what our main concern is a program that's societal, sitting in your molecules, because it will cause disease. So we're going to highlight those now and begin to erase them for you, and you see the lead-ins going outside somewhere to maybe work, or maybe your home circumstance, or perhaps school, or perhaps something else you're involved with. Now, light wave synergy has programmed you with Babaji, and it's not societal programming. We'll get to that in a minute. It was for divinity. So he programmed you for divinity, and we'll get into that programming after we get rid of your societal systems in your molecular structure. And whatever needs to be plugged into your foundry from this, we will do. And if some of it needs to be diffused, to fuse it now. And that frees up your molecules to spin more freely at this time. Why does societal programming end up inside molecules? Sosa is examining this and setting up templates for people to release because it's going to make them sick otherwise. We sometimes gauge things through star seed action. So you looked at it and said, this is a major problem. Then we look at it and we arrange a healing schema for others that need to also be healed in relation to whatever it is that you find as star seeds as you transfuse. So you're a gift to us because you see things and then we can apply it to humans en masse because they have similar problems, often in their own infrastructure. You give to us, and it's why we support you as we do. And so societal programming has its cues. Now a cue looks like a yellow ribbon outside of some part of your molecular structure, and the cue is often for a change, alright? We're going to remove the cues now, however many they are, because societal changes need to be generated in the foundry. So the yellow ribbon moves to the foundry and not the molecular structure. And we find that very strange, but we're not sure exactly how everything was structured because this society lost their seeds in another galaxy long ago. So their archetypal knowing is missing, and they're opening up systems of Egypt. But the Egyptians aren't their anthology either, but we'll segue it as best we can to help life work out for this emerging light wave society. And that's our role as Sosa Dreaming. What we wish to show you is that societal programming plugs into the foundry, and some of it is very negative. And when it's negative, you see a black chunk of something in your foundry. And we're going to remove it, and let that program leave. Okay? There may be as many as 4 or 5 here, while some may have very few. Societies program you to be a certain way in relation to itself, and it's not right in light wave dream stream to be a negative programming ever, because it fosters sick dreams. So we're going to remove that today, and through time, if it shows up again, you remove it again. and you have a vision of it all as you go to deprogram, because as you release something out of the molecules, if it takes you to your foundry and you see a black brick or something, you will know to call on us to diffuse it and release it. So we have an engineering schemata coming in to try to remove negative social programming from the galley way of humanity, but it may take several years to complete upon it because it's so complex. So humanity will be reprogrammed for a light wave society, and mostly that's going to affect children, not necessarily even the young adults, which is sad for them, some if they end up in a negative experience. But we are setting up personal healing around it if they dream with us. So we'll see how that unfolds for each through time. We wish the embedment of everyone and not just some, and we know that there's an aged generation from 50, 60, and 70 up that need to pass and leave the physical plane soon. If you're in that age range, you have renewed and revived and brought yourself into another circumstance to be at peace, and that's very good for you. You're very gifted at reviving in your latter years, and that's a beautiful thing about light wave airstream is it can renew and revive the body. Phosphorus is even better than just light wave motion. Some of you were given a phosphorus bath because of your frequent participation in DAS and your dedication to your spiritual ascension journey. Those that want to receive phosphorus should ask for a phosphorus bath by making the intention to participate in DAS during dream time just before falling asleep each night. It's a beautiful gift of us and Spirit to embalm you in it. It's almost an embalming system that rolled in due to Tao intervention foresees. So you get a phosphorus bath in solar system, and then it infuses into your bones. It stays with you and it plugs into the foundry. It's a pretty amazing circumstance of being in a revival of you, because that's what phosphorus does. There are phosphorus planets that revive almost endlessly, and people do live in them sometimes, but Earth was never a phosphorus planet to begin with. The planet only produces phosphorus in 9 locations, and Mesa is one of them, which is kind of difficult for anybody to receive much of unless they live there. But fortunately for those who participated in Asur'Ana Jasminia Dreamtime Ascension School, SOSA is able to give you a phosphorus bath remotely. So here's our point about the programming. If the foundry has brown chips in it, that's not a negative program of society. It's a program in transition and the yellow bowl will go on top of it. It may be a cluster of things you're forgiving or reversing out of your life to make a life change. So if you're making a life change, the areas of social programming that are related will be brown bricks, and the yellow bowl should go on top of it, indicating that you're transitioning out of this to do something new in your life. That's a very personal choice of your seed to do for you if it wants you to reverse out of a circumstance that may be making you sick, or a place that you shouldn't live, or a career that isn't right for you, or something else that might show up in that too. Sometimes reversals are needed to marry your right partner, or to do some other life change like have a child, if that's what you're seeking to do. So whatever it is, the brown brick is about life changes, and you leave the bowl on it. And when you're finishing, and when you're finished reversing out of the programming, the circumstance will change for you quite naturally. There's no way to rush it. You have to reverse layer by layer out of your programming to cause any kind of life change. Sometimes the change goes hand in hand with a new program that may be coming in on the other end to foster where you are to go and what you are to do after the change is complete. And that's a yellow brick, the incoming programming. There's no other way to do it in this society. So, for example, if you're leaving your wife and you want to find a twin to go marry, the yellow brick will contain the programming to meet your twin. And as that goes, this comes in, and suddenly there's a bridge where you have to go, and you leave or move or do whatever you do, and then you start dating and find your twin. If you're trying to change jobs, there'll come a point where the programming releases. If the new job is coming in, then maybe you wait for it, or maybe you don't. Sometimes you have to disjoin from a job in order to foster the new incoming program, and that's very strange, but that's the way it works. Sometimes because whatever you may be doing is so rigid, you can't give birth to something new until you let go of it. That can be true for a move too, that you have to let go of something and then bring in something new. Before meeting Per, in one of her relocations, Asur'Ana discovered that she had to put her things in a storage and then come and rent a vacation rental and then find a more permanent rental, and it all worked as long as she left everything in storage. And she didn't have a home for an interim of only 2 weeks because everything fell together pretty easily for her. But we speak to that because sometimes that's what was needed. We had her give her furnishings away to the moving company other than her boxes, which had kitchenware and clothes, because we didn't want to carry anything from the past into the future. That wasn't very much because she hasn't furnished much in the apartment, just a few things that worked for her. So sometimes there's things you can bring with you when you make a move, and sometimes you can't. That could be true for you if you're planning a major move. That as a yellow brick comes, the brown brick leaves, and the brown brick may include furniture or other things you really need to let go of. Clothes that isn't right for you because in the new domain that you're moving into, it just doesn't synergize or complement you in your light wave motion. So be aware of that as you make a change to take only what's right and leave the rest, or give it away, or sell it, or whatever you need to do to offload it. Be well with that, because when you bring old baggage, it reinstates the social programming back into your foundry. See? If you're marrying and you're moving in together and you have two homes of things, be very, very certain about what you want to share together. And if you want to sell it all off and buy new, that might be best for your foundries to be true to your own unison as a couple. All things carry the discord of what you lived through, even if you're not entirely aware of it, because as you dream at night, you systematize your emotional discord to perhaps be in the unconscious, and it moves into your bed and furnishings and other things in your home you're not aware of. Sometimes it's hard to clear emotional debris out of furnishings. So we'll explain how that works, and it's an issue of charge, alright? So in your dreaming of whatever's negative about the people you associate, or whatever it is that's there, it's like other programming surfaces as you snore away in bed that has a negative charge. And if you don't offload it or release it, it ends up in your furnitures. And that's a very weird thing to do, okay? So what we can do about that is have you call up the programming in the body that you discharge into your environment and erase it today. So this is unconscious programming or wiring of perhaps the very opposite of who you are in the physical, and it has maybe many more negative programs than what you looked at to begin with, which was about your daytime wake awareness as you live your life. So let's take out the unconscious program layers out of you and out of your furnishings and see if that frees up your environment to feel a little better as you rest, or better perhaps in general. Now, if you're living with family, know that all their emotional programming that's in their unconscious is also in your furnishings, and you can't really do all the layers that you're releasing now for them. is highly complex in their molecular structure. Seeds have a unique molecular system that layers them front to back, side to side, and up and down, and programming sits between the molecules, and so it's easier to remove unconscious programming out of seeds than the humans that exist in the oligarchy society. Even seedlings don't arrange their molecular structure quite this way. Therefore, you're very lucky to be a seed in a way, because you can discharge this unconscious negative debris of you and programming that you never live but shows up in your dream time. And that's better for your furnishings. If you're living with others, you may want to have a room all of your own that you set up with your own furnishings. That is a place that you can be at peace or rest. Perhaps it's your altar space, or perhaps it's something else, unless you're married or living with a seed, and you don't have to feel other people's emotional disturbances in the furniture either. And so what we recommend to you is not to worry about it and not go into it and feel their despair and negativity or whatever's going on as they dream their negativity away at night when you rest. Now here's one more thing about this. In the back of all of it maybe is what looks like a star. It might be green, it might be turquoise, it might be blue, and there might be several. And that's a point of entry for programming. If you can see that star in your molecules, which is a point of entry to receive new programs, erase it. Look for it weekly, because as you evolve up, you go up higher, and your molecules ignite and expand a little bit, and then you will see more of what lays between them. So don't think you're removing all the programming for your whole life today. It doesn't work that way. You just have to keep going until it's all erased, and that's all we can say about it in any given week of transfusion. The programming that can surface can be societal, or be past family disturbances, or school disturbances, or life disturbances in general, or work disturbances. It can also be of the anthology, okay? Because your anthology has its own program, but the programming of your anthology is generally more expensive. When that aligns, you want to have a spiritual path, you want to know more, you want to grow whole, you want to understand yourself, you want to self-realize, and that's seed program. There isn't negative seed programming. There's seed programming for creative capabilities. If your ancestors were gifted at educating children, then that's a good life path for you. If they were gifted at creative endeavors, such as song and dance, then maybe song and dance could be a life focus. Or perhaps it's just a hobby you would want to trigger and then go take a dance class and have fun with it. Or buy a karaoke machine and learn to sing for yourself unless you're already a musician. There's C programming for other talents like creative capabilities of bead making or clothing making or silk painting or painting walls or making things beautiful in a creative sense. If you have that programming and you want to be an artisan, then maybe that works for you. If you don't want to be an artisan, then perhaps it's just a beautiful hobby to enjoy and attune to. We want to trigger these programs in you if you have them in your C system because they are beautiful things, and the program to self-realize may already be active because of the focuses of light wave synergy and our webinars and teachings. But there are other parts of it that maybe you need to trigger to fully open to understand yourself better. So we want to open that programming that's of the seed for realization systems so that you can understand yourself better in your own psychosis of who you are. We will use that word. It's a SOSA word. Everything is in a psychosis until it realizes itself beyond it. So every problem you have is a psychosis until you realize beyond it and take a new action that leads to a deeper sense of peace or forgiveness or understanding or a place that you can be well within. And so psychosis is a non-well part of you or a non-well space, and realization is a well space where you grow out of the psychosis and go in another direction in yourself. Okay? Now, psychosis will always have programming in the molecular structure. So when you're in a psychosis about something that's sick in your life that you don't like or don't feel well about, you're not aligned with. It just doesn't work for you. You will say, okay, that's where I have a psychosis. I'm not well with that boss. I'm not well with my partner. I'm not well with my children. I'm not well with my mother or father, grandparents. I'm not well with this person in my life, whoever they are. I'm not well with this other person that I used to know but don't hang out with anymore. Wherever you're still unwell is a psychosis. We bring this up as an understanding that something about a circumstance with anybody, you know where you have a problem, you have a program, and you can take it out, and in that you may realize something else about yourself or about your disturbance that allows you to find your truth inside of yourself by leaving behind your delusion. Now, a delusion has a program as a base, so pick somebody you have a psychosis over in your life, and we'll use this as an example. Then you can go through many others later or as you come back to listen to this webinar. So put that face up on your screen and then say to yourself, okay, I have my own delusion about this individual and it disturbs me how I feel about them inside myself, and in that I am not in my truth. But whatever it is, put them up there and then highlight the programs and your molecules that link to your psychosis about that individual. This is really cool, okay? Because there's some charge in you about it, and it makes you upset or angry or something. And whatever it is a charge in you and not necessarily in them at all. Sometimes it can be mutual charges of different things that show up. Often that will happen in partnership, and we'll talk about that too for those of you that are in partnership or seeking partnership. Rarely does it happen with children, because children are in a place of non-psychosis until they hit their teenage years. So they're just earnest little people that roam around and learn what they learn. Sometimes they may drive you up the wall, but that's your charge and not theirs until they turn about 11. At age 11, adult programming starts to set in. If they're a starseed, it could bring in starseed programming, but sometimes it doesn't. If you have starseed children, you want to aid them in bringing in starseed programming at age 11 if you can, and omit the other stuff that they don't really need. But anyway, then all of a sudden, they hit their teenage years and you're even more disturbed because now they're charged and you're charged with parallel programming if they share your anthology or some other disturbance occurring within their growing body. If they knew how to take out their negative programming, life would be better in teenage years. And that was Louis Bostwick's feeling about it. That all people should be teaching their children and teenagers how to deprogram themselves and how to release the psychic debris that makes people unhappy through time. He called it debris. We call it hell. Hell pervades the planet, and people go into it and feel unwell, and it creates psychic debris. You may see psychic debris around you, and if so, whisk it off into a basket, off to a corner where we shred it, and let it go to mulch. It hits people a lot, and people are using the white powder theory to clear hell gates and clear hell out of the environment. So the debris will lessen because it's very difficult in light wave motion to sit in psychic debris of hell, and that's where the white powder theory, which is a gold silver white ray that we've spoken to, is very useful. Now they've created a silver powder that is more powerful at shutting hell gates down, and we're going to place that, or have you placed that in the walls of your home and the floors and the ceilings today, and also in the infrastructure of your spine to clear out small hell gates that may motion psychic debris in and out of your systems of molecules. And that's not a good thing to have in you either, so we'll help you clear it out today. The Daos are really gracious with all the light wave children that are throwing this powder almost everywhere, thus make things sparkle and the hell gates are snapping shut. That's very important to a light wave society because hell creates negative dreams and then people don't do well and they start to get sick or they start to argue a lot or start a war that's not nuclear, and that's what the kids want to divert if they can. So they are very systematically closing down hell gates in major cities such as Paris, Rome, London, New York, San Francisco, Seattle, and Vancouver. It's odd that all these big cities build themselves around hell gates, but they do, and that's true for Singapore and also Tokyo and also big cities anywhere that they are with high rises. High rises are a sign that there's hell gates in the infrastructure of the region. If it's just low rises, then perhaps or perhaps not. That's odd, but that's just the way it worked in this civilization. They built their towns around hell gates or around hell systems, which is weird, but in time that will all be cleansed up and the kids are very, very forceful about it. This won't stay and it has to go. We want a light wave society. We want to be like the Egyptians or the Atlanteans and not anything else. We won't settle for this. Some of them are coming in as babies, taking this forceful stance of, no, I don't want a future like that. This is my life, and I want it this way. They're running around doing all kinds of things as they sleep at night to help the planet heal and help the infrastructure of humanity shift. So please bless them and thank them for their stance because it improves your future too. They have time to focus on it all day because they're children, and that sets up another force to take wind tunnels of time and change the direction of it so that the world can blow into a new postulation of a positive tomorrow and not a negative one. That's what they're working on today, and that was from Egyptian understanding, and bless the little ones for all that they're trying to do for you too. So here we want to bring you to the infrastructure of your molecules once again to look at hell programming, okay? So bring it up as beads of cause and effect, throw blue on it, and let's start to erase the first and the last bead out of anything to do with hell in your infrastructure of the life. Because what it does is draw hell systems or negative systems of hell towards you in your own experience. Now, some of this may be social programming, and if you see social programming threats, then there's going to be a black brick in your foundry. We want to remove that. Some people like to throw each other into hell in this society because they don't want to be in it themselves. And then you have a very negative day or a very negative experience. And then you get yourself out of it because usually Cs are very gifted at not remaining in negative experiences or gates for very long. But it's a very sad thing to witness when that happens. And as the kids shut them all down, people can't use them anymore. They're older and they get confused, and that's going to be better because they don't get to injure it or throw things into negativity around them, and they can't do what they thought they could do. And so make sure to white powder everything you go to shut down, and silver powder too for hell gates and shut them all down. Then people can't throw each other in hell and can't try to manipulate you into a hellacious day, because that's often what it does for starseeds. So as you look at the programming that may be social for occasionally going into hellacious experience, let's get rid of it, and let's get rid of that black brick and erase the programming out of the molecules. If you've had people program you to be in a hellacious experience from time to time, then it's time to remove that programming too and erase the first and the last bead of each string so that you don't manifest that again in your life experience. Hell is not normally associated with any light society. That's what the kids discovered in the Egyptian archives and some Atlantean archives that Asur'Ana brought forward that were uncovered in Iceland and Norway. In Atlantis, there was no hell, there was no darkness. Everything was pure and everything was gracious. People could love and swing and sway all day and never injure one another in any psychic abuse manner. The kids want that kind of society, and we don't blame them at all. But this society that we're emerging from is very much into hell or into darkness or into corroding things from time to time. That's very painful for starseeds too, because you were maybe meant for a society that was bright and light like Atlantis, and not the one you're living in. So in the use of the white truth powder, and you can push it at people that you're in association with, and it will clean up the things that might be derogatory or negative in your presence too, that might come through them. And you can push the silver powder into the environment to close hell gates. There are syncopated rhythms for that show up over a time if there's enough of the powder present that finally send it to where it originated, which may be a big city far away, and then send it down into another infrastructure that freezes it. So the silver powder was designed by a Dao witnessing something beautiful in a dragon that consumed the white powder and then put another substance in it that allowed the added silver, it was mostly silver, to force hell gates to close that wouldn't close otherwise. That was a beautiful gift from the Dragon Kingdom towards the white powder system that showed up due to a Tao saying, "This planet can't afford to have hell in it and motion light, or it's going to be very, very sick, or it's going to be a very, very sick world and a nuclear strife." So here we ought to say that in the system of the change of this world, it needs to be directed perhaps by you more physically. So be aware as you adventure to where you're going to push these powders into the walls and ceilings and floors and into people that are in need of it, so they can discharge hell out of the environment and out of their life too. The white powder is very nurturing to the molecules and seems to renew and revive people very beautifully. So it's not a harmful substance at all, neither of them actually, and that's beautiful to know too. So here we are, and let's plug your feet and your tailbone into the white powder system, and let's flush it now of psychic debris that may be between the molecules, and infuse the silver powder in there too, in case there's tiny hell gates or something else that need to close out of the molecular infrastructure. Now the powder itself may cause other programming to show up, and we want to show you how to use this. We would say that this is a once a week treatment and not to do it every day, but as you need it, because the white powder has no effect beyond a certain point if there isn't debris to remove. So as you flush it, other programs may suddenly show up that have to do with something else that you're emotionally charged about to release. So let's go ahead and erase the first and the last bead of any other program that's showing up, and it may be related to the person on your screen that you have an emotional issue about, because those charges may be deep, whoever that is that caused you strife or is causing you strife now in your life. And so let go of the psychosis of the emotional wounds related to the strife with that individual. Let the white powder, the white ray of purification, and the silver ray of anti-hell to release what it is that bonds you to another. Now here we're going to show you something else. So this person you have up on your screen, let's put their molecular structure next to yours. Now if they're not a light wave transfusion person, then they may be very dim in their molecules, and don't worry about that. That's not what we're trying to clean up, but we're going to show you where you're connected to them through a thread called attachment between programs you're letting go of and programs they also motion. Alright? What we want you to do is erase the threads. When you're done erasing the threads, let go of the vision of their molecules because we're not going to touch their programming per se at all. And if you are to, then it's a social directory to remove programming that's maybe not well for them, for you in their lives. So Sosa will take over at that point and remove programming that isn't well for you in relation to them if there's something very, very much there that needs to be released. Let's take a deep breath and forgive them for whatever trespassed upon you or whatever it is you feel that they did to you that's not well or negative. Forgive them, and then you see something will show up that's kind of interesting. Sometimes there'll be a program for forgiveness that shows up, and I wouldn't remove that if I were you. Generally, it's pink. So if you look at the bees close up, they're pink, and they have a seed system in them. So there are seed programs for forgiveness, and if you don't have at least 2 seed programs for forgiveness, let's add another one into your molecular infrastructure today. If you have 2, add one more, and as you come back to review this webinar, add another. It takes time to integrate, so you can't add usually more than 1 program string at a time. But a forgiveness program string is very helpful to you to simply say, "Okay, I forgive." And suddenly the program turns on and the pattern releases between you and the other. It's a very forceful program, and it may even take out programs in your molecular infrastructure that aren't well with the other, that have been triggered through time, and the emotional charge you feel with them. As you build as many as 5 forgiveness program strings into the molecular structure, you may never have to deprogram yourself again. And that's what Asur'Ana's discovered. She doesn't deprogram her molecular structure and hasn't for years. She just loves and forgives, and it erases itself due to 5 program strings from her archaeology that was a program for forgiveness. She had one for compassion too, and we'll look at that for you too. Compassion is sometimes needed as a bridge to let go of something else, not programming, but something else that isn't well for you. And we'll get into that in a minute. So as you let the forgiveness program come in, we're going to talk about delusions, or masks, or veils, or hallucinogens, or fantasy realities that people run, in this society. Seeds can run them too, and you may run them too. So we're going to talk about them first personally. When you wear a mask, you show somebody who you want them to see, and perhaps not yourself. And we would recommend, given the nature of light, that you give up on masks, because it's better to transfigure your face in light, beautiful, and let others to see the beauty of you rather than wear a mask. Some masks in you or even others can be quite gruesome. So you want to show somebody a gruesome face to scare them away and leave you alone. That's a funny thing to do, but sometimes it does work. If they're kind of a character you don't want to dance with very much. But we would recommend, due to how transfiguration works, that if you have masks that you use regularly, they can lead to problems in the cortex and problems in the facial structure through time as you transfuse heavily. So whatever masks you run, let them go now. Most of you probably have 2 or 3 remaining that you need to diffuse today. You just diffuse them out of your own system and you will transfigure your face beautiful so that people can see the beauty of you rather than some disguise. Some faces are very made up and very beautiful looking when you put them on, but the problem is the light can emulsify the face, and the face then may grow old or not do well in its revival or renewal, and all those creams women buy often to try to prevent that. Men don't care about that as much, but either way it doesn't help your revival to have face masks, even if they're beautiful. So diffuse those too. The other time you can put on a mask is for somebody that is very negative with you, and you learn to give them a face that they can live with and not be negative towards you anymore. Let that go too, and just be beautiful in you and let them react how they react. Let go of the negative programming that triggers and you be better and they may not. I don't know, but don't worry about it. Deal with you first always, because it's all inside you anyway. It's not really out there, but we'll get into other people's masks and some things like that so you better understand it in the interplay of the oligarchy society. So the next thing that can sometimes show up is a body garb. It's a custom of sorts, and the custom can be related to work or related to sport or related to something else you entertain yourself with. It can be related to many things that you think you need a garb to be a part of. If you're in a profession and you wear a garb, that's okay, but the light may not emulsify in or around or through it. So you run light at night when you sleep and you don't during the day, and that doesn't really work out for you. So it's time to diffuse those kinds of things if you have them or have used them in the past. So you diffuse them all the way through time to before you were born. Don't participate in wearing garb anymore around who you are, who you need to be at work, or who you need to be at home, or who you need to be in a social circle or anywhere else. Some politicians, and this is an odd thing to look at, can have like hundreds of garbs, and they change them to be in certain circles of people that they have to live with, and that can really age the body through time. That's why prime ministers or presidents can really age. Same thing with positions of queens and kings. They can end up in that position too. That's very sad, to have to pretend to be something you're not, to be okay as a politician or as a prime minister or as a president, but that's how it works in this society. You would never choose for that kind of job ever if you thought you were supposed to. You would probably lose the battle of the election because it really wouldn't be a good thing for you as a star seed to have to wear too many garbs and try to transfuse. In any case, we're going to talk about one other aspect of transfiguration, and you want to bring in a program for transfiguration into the molecular structure. Some may have one already. If it is, it will show up now. Generally, it is a shade of pale blue. It is a program that says, I transfigure myself beautiful always, from head to toe, with everyone I am near, and that's all. If you don't have that program, let's bring it in so that you transfigure yourself beautiful in light everywhere you go. Light is organza along the skin, and you can shape it to be beautiful. You can shape it to anoint your skin. You can shape it to make your hair fluff or be shiny. You can shape it in many different directions that helps the epidermis heal and discharge the negativity that sometimes you receive as a blast of airstream from others. So when you keep the focus of transfiguring yourself beautiful, the negativity of others floats off, and you don't have to feel harassed by it or injured by it through time. And so there is a second transfigurative program, which is about your divine blueprint of the physical. For those that are ready to receive your divine blueprint in the physical, we'll bring in that program. But if you don't have a Transfigure Me Beautiful program, you have to integrate that first, and that may take a month, and then come back and bring in your divine beauty blueprint. Sometimes the divine beauty blueprint was loaded by Babaji because he wanted you to transfigure into your divine blueprint and not just anything that you light motioned around you. And if it was his gift. But we want to update it from your own seed to be a star seed system. Bless Babaji because he really tried to anoint you and bring you into a circumstance where divinity and grace would be your light wave emotions and light wave truth ahead. Some of you can think of that as a pantheon of a spiritual disciple ordering thing, and that's not what divinity is, okay? It's not just about spirituality. In societies of light, everything's divine. Each person is divine, and nobody thinks about it. You don't think about it as Mother Teresa or Gandhi or some other character in the winds of time that did something amazing in divine aspirations and what they stood for, wrote about, or whatever they thought. In light, everybody is divine, and everybody should be divine. And if you're not divine, you're going to have illness in the physical. So you have to be in divine beauty in light in order to preserve yourself and renew and revitalize your molecules. It's hard to think of a civilization fully in divine love. What would that mean? Well, that was Atlantis, and that was for a long time. In the Egyptian society too. And that's what the light wave kids are understanding. Oh, it's about divine blueprint. Oh, it's about divine love. Divinity is not in a church or in a person that stood for something through time, like Yogananda or Sai Baba or some other Maharaji here and there. It's about all of us choosing for divine love and divine awareness to understand what light means, to understand that light means beauty and grace and nothing else. And so that's the force of society, because the kids are choosing for that, which means a lot of change where it gives bloom to itself. But that's also you as a star seed. You're here to express divine beauty, love, light, and nothing else. And there's nothing else to express. I think in another webinar, we said let's erase all the negativity, all the negative vocabulary out of the languages that you've spoken this lifetime. We're going to focus on that again because it's really important not to have negative words in your vocabulary at all, because they only lead to weird airstream and light around you. So if you come up blank because in times past you would have said something or felt something or thought something negative about something, it just may not be there at all to think about. Maybe that's better in the end, as light motions more graciously and transfigures you more into beauty and grace rather than something else. And that's the need to focus on positive things, positive thoughts, positive desires, positive direction, positive systems in your life. It's very important to focus on that in relation to your own existence, because when it's in a positive force of like divine highlights, then all your dreams align and they just come together. And it's beautiful for you and everybody that you share anything with. That's the power of light and the power of love and the power of divinity, which says, everything's divine, you're divine, I'm divine, we're each divine. Each character, whether it's mother, father, grandparent, grandmother, whoever it is you had a problem with, brother, sister, cousins, uncles, aunts, anybody else in your life that's friends, they're still divine. They're still divine because they express something that's perhaps needed to teach you something, perhaps even if it's been a difficult experience. The difficult experience is still in you, and there is an emotional charge in a programming system in your molecules. If you take that out, then you won't feel negative about them anymore because the charge is gone. And that's the power of you to transform you, not them. Because you may not be able to change whatever they're doing, or saying, or speaking, or whatever it is that irritated you. But you may find that the irritation isn't there anymore because you took away the irritating program, and that's all. And so in that, you won't stay in your negativity for very long about anybody, because you be able to go inward and say, what programs have been triggered today? What do I need to erase? And where do I need to go with it so I can grow whole and grow positive or beautiful and grow in a direction that allows me to be enamored with myself and enamored with my life and enamored with each? That's a hard percolation sometimes, but that's what it does come down to if you're going to stay beautiful and healthy in light. So we're going to talk about other things. There's other things called hallucinogens. A hallucinogen is like a transfigurative action to create the hallucination of something about you that appeals to one or more. Now, in transfigurative notions, that is a huge gift to be able to do that, to surround yourself in a hallucinogenic system and say, I'm beautiful, or I'm divine, or I'm exotic, and I love you, and you love me, and all of that. It is a force that can be used for the masses. Now you can look at Sai Baba, and boy was he a hallucinogen or what. He made himself world famous in divine care space in a major hallucinogenic action with Babaji. I don't believe he's with us anymore physically, but it's very beautiful to witness what he could construct with that took people not just to his ashram, but made them wonder about divinity or pondered the spiritual path. He was a major force, maybe in the West too, for opening to Babaji's system of spiritual education. Babaji was a spiritual education system, and most of you went through it one or many times. It was about 90 days of classes that were around the clock. They're not airing anymore, but Sosa is looking at them for the sake of the children. And looking at some other systems of education that they have about the spiritual path, they may open soon and may reach people in another direction physically in terms of their life mission and what they want to focus on or what they want to do. For seeds, you've been on a spiritual mission your whole life, and you really know that, and that's not a direction of existence. It's just who you are. That's what I would say about all star seeds. It's just who you are to be spiritual, because you need to understand yourself, and you need to be in order to be well with this world of you. And now you're understanding some things that may help you release the emotional charges of the past or the negativity out of your own systems, so that you can grow more positive and into your truth, so that you can go forward and dream something you really desire in your life and not fret about things so much anymore. That's the gift of this information. Now, if hallucinogenic system is a yogi predisposition, if they're gifted at it, Asur'Ana is not. She's just gifted in being in her truth. So she doesn't create a hallucinogen around her. And she's never going to be popular in the world for a dream of this society, because you would need that in order to be world famous. She knew that when she was little, that wasn't her goal. Her goal was to reach seeds who needed knowledge to live their lives better and then reseed off the planet, because you don't belong here in the first place. That isn't a program. That's just a stanza of what needs to happen as you leave the physical. You need to leave with your seed to go back to where you belonged, and that's really all. But we're here with one more system that is societal, and is called fantasy realities. Fantasy realities look like a machine, and usually they are kind of gated in different directions. If somebody runs a fantasy reality, they will appear to you as someone that they are not. They will go in and out of the machine, and it won't be necessarily around their body all the time. But they're gifted at going into the machine and taking on the appearance of something they are not. Most people are very much participatory in fantasy realities in this society, and they move in and out of them in relation to the media. So there are fantasy realities that come out of shows like the 1977 to 1984 Fantasy Island television series, or whatever shows that people like to watch. The more popular the show, the bigger the fantasy reality is that it generates, and the more people can move in and out of it and take on disguises to look like something else until it gets confusing for you to know who someone really is underneath all their disguises. Now, those who watch the media often get involved with fantasy realities without your knowing. A long time ago, Shatar told Asur'Ana, no more TV, no more movies, no more anything, because it really wasn't good for her to be in those fantasy realities, because they hurt her infrastructure of field and his development of her. She's kept that notion and doesn't even do much in relation to the news anymore or anything else, because she attunes to it on the web, and it absolutely hurts her field and smacks at her, because the fantasy reality is so charged on, say, the BBC News or some other broadcasts that it just literally hits your infrastructure and can damage your transfusion galleyways. So be careful with the media. There have been movies she's gone to, at Shadhar's suggestion, to diffuse something into the gallery of what he generated. But he's not with us very much anymore because he was never meant to be a light wave environment. Now the kids are taking a stand that they need media to be positive in light wave motion, and that's how it was in Atlantis. They're looking at those archives because the media there was to generate like social awareness or share of something beautiful that others could witness, and that did work for a long time in their society. So the light wave kids want positive media, not all this negativity of violence and all of that, not just in the media but the movie industry. They also want humor and something that can enliven things, but they want the fantasy realities disbanded, and they get stuck in the television and the electrical wiring of it, and the kids just push them back into the television and say, I don't want to be a part of those fantasy realities. And then it kind of gets stuck there and it doesn't open anymore. So if you are in an airport or at a bar that runs sports TV or whatever it is, push all the fantasy realities back into the television and you won't be bothered as much in such environments. If you watch something because you enjoy it, such as perhaps music shows or cooking shows or something that you think is fun, then push all the fantasies about it back into the television and then see how you really feel about it. Is it really helpful to you? Is it really something you want to enjoy, learn, or listen to? Or is it just something you need really to turn off? I don't know how you feel as often is the fantasy realities that consume people. The problem is you lose your consciousness to the fantasy realities. So it's an odd thing, but the media has grown in certain ways and may even have spiritual focuses in movies or shows on PBS or other places that people are intrigued by, and thus your consciousness of awareness may be going into the fantasies of the media industry producing shows like that, and you don't want to lose your consciousness ever. So if you clear the fantasy reality out of the room that's associated with each television, then you're less likely to lose consciousness as well. If you choose to engage in something that may be positive, be very careful of negative themed shows or emotionally charged shows because they can wind up in your play of life and show up in a year or two, even if you're not expecting it, because you attuned to this drama that really wasn't positive or useful to your own life stream. If you like to read novels or books, pick positive themes. If they go into negative things, throw them away because they're not good for your mind to focus on light wave motion, because it will call it to you too quickly, and that's not good for you. So the kids are having fun putting down all the fantasy realities. If you go into a major theater and there's been children in there that are young, the fantasy realities are all going to be undone. That's kind of funny because people like to go to the theater with the big screen to get the charge of the movie all the way through their nervous system, and it may not work as well anymore. And I would say, oh dear, the light wave kids have been here. They don't want fantasy realities for themselves or anybody else, and perhaps that's better to do. And understand it will change the world some because people will be less influenced by the negativity of the media and maybe be a little bit more positive in their lives as a result. And so, fantasy realities can also spin at resorts. They can spin at famous restaurants. They can spin in products that are famous, like famous Amos cookies or whatever. They can spin in directions that are very strange. Pear wanders up and down the shelves looking for things, and very rarely does he buy anything packaged, just organic brown rice, organic rice flour, or organic rice noodles, because he's having to do rice due to abdominal change. Pear is very careful to pick brands that don't have some kind of fantasy reality associated. So the fantasies pervade toothpaste, mouthwash, and creams and all this stuff on the shelves that are advertised heavily on the television, and they have fantasy realities behind them. People eat their Cheerios or whatever they're eating in a cereal in the morning box of themselves, and suddenly they're in a fantasy reality of that advertisement. If it's meant to make you feel well or laugh, now you laugh and you feel well, but the product may not be good for the abdomen or your blood or anything else. Therefore, if you get a few well charged over something that you really shouldn't eat, understand it's a fantasy reality you're going into, perhaps associated with that product or with that restaurant. So if the restaurant that you feel good and doesn't serve the food you really need to eat, find another restaurant that feels good, that serves the right things, and eat there instead. I just want to say a little bit about fast food. I mean, you go to McDonald's. Asur'Ana goes there usually to use the toilets and not anything else. And that's a feel well fantasy at McDonald's. And she thinks about eating something and then walks out. Occasionally, she'll get an iced tea and that's all. But it's really a feel well fantasy, and people get addicted to the feel well as they go in there and eat. But it's really sick food for light wave motion. So whatever you're addicted to, take a look at that as a fantasy produced by the company that manufactures it, or by the restaurant itself if it's a chain or it has some power. Now, Pear loves sushi bars, but he only consumes vegan sushi. And there are those that create the delusion of being in Japan or in Hawaii, and those were the ones Pear loves the most because there he is in an island airstream back in time in Tokyo or in Kapa'a where he first met Asur'Ana, in a fantasy reality of what it meant to be on holiday forever. And suddenly he is transported in himself to someplace beautiful, and he feels blissful as he finishes his meal. So that can happen in many different directories of reality. Now his Tao said, use it, enjoy it, and don't worry about it, and leave the fantasy behind at the restaurant. Don't take it home. Some people like to take fantasy realities home, and then what happens is suddenly you have a part of the restaurant or the hotel or whatever it is you liked in your home rather than just your home. We suggest you take those fantasy realities and shut them back down to whatever purge they belong to, because they are not really good for light wave motion. If there are certain products that you have purchased that brings a fantasy into the home, shut it down, because it is really an electrical reality and doesn't work well with light. There's a couple of Vietnamese restaurants that Per and Asur'Ana have been to, and it creates the ambience of being in Vietnam. It's a fantasy reality of being in Vietnam, and it's very peaceful, it's very loving. The food always digests, it's always tasty, and so they go there. They don't drag a part of it to their home or even into their Buddha statue. So don't do that, or if you feel something from a place you frequent, then let it go out of your home now, because it's not the best thing for you to do is being in a fantasy reality in light. Now you will notice in these places, and this can be true for certain stanzas of shopping malls. So in a shopping mall, there's a fantasy like, this is a kind place to shop for your trinkets, and it's beautiful, it's mesmerizing, and it's glorious, and you should come here frequently and spend your loot over here. That's the way it works. Asur'Ana and Per found this beautiful old town, Scottsdale, filled with restaurants and charming shops and delightful places to buy native wear and all this stuff. They roam around and go, wow, this feels really good. A lot of the merchants motion a lot of light to keep the fancy reality going. So the restaurants fill up and everybody is happy and comfortable in their pocketbook of self, and that's the way that it chimes. It's a very interesting thing because the fantasies aren't really present. They're kind of in the back burner of the walls of the buildings, because the youth that runs a lot of lights says, I don't want to be in a fantasy. I'll shove the fantasy into the wall and leave it there. So that's something else you can do about fantasy realities that pervade an environment that are uncomfortable for you. You motion them into the wall, and then they still spin their aura of like beauty, such as the sushi bar with a Hawaiian system of dream, but it doesn't interfere with the people or injure them or injure their molecular structure, because fantasy realities can injure your molecular structure. So going back to that, you want to put your molecular structure back up on your screen and highlight where you're hooked to a fantasy reality from home, from work, from someplace you frequent, or even from a friend or partner or child, and you want to disengage it out of your molecular infrastructure and let it fold and diffuse it under the foundry. Now, people like to hide in fantasy realities. That's one of the things to witness if you feel charmed by someone and then suddenly it goes into the opposite flavor. In the moment of the fantasy, they look wonderful and sweet and kind, and then you're intimate with them, or you do something with them a little too close, and suddenly you don't feel well about them at all. What it is they surround themselves in a fantasy of beauty, or a fantasy of love, or a fantasy of something else, and people respond to them out of that fantasy. Oh, you're a very loving person. We really like you. We want to have you near. But underneath the undercurrent of the fantasy, they don't really love, they don't really heal, they don't really give, they don't really do anything sincere to anything. Asur'Ana has experienced this a couple times in her life, where she thought that the people close to her loved her when they didn't, so she grew up and out and through and around it as a star seed and into something else that let her feel divine love, and she came to understand that the love is inside of her and it has nothing to do with anybody else. But if it's inside you, you can share it with others who love too, and then life grows beautiful in itself. And that's where the kids are at. They go, oh, we have to love inside. We have to love ourselves first. And as we do that, then we can share our love with one another. And then everything else will work because love is the foundation of light anyway. So if you don't love, you can't really run light in a way that's going to heal or preserve you or anyone else. And so the fantasies that maybe have of the society are in may present things as some way that they want to be, and that's what Shatar called it, their wannabes. They want to be divine, love, or they want to be the aspiration of you as a loving Tao heart, but they can't ever grow it because underneath their fantasy of themselves, they don't love at all. That was a very sad revelation through time, because what fantasies do is mirror your love back to you. So they stand there in a wall of mirrors, and you love and you bless, and they mirror it back to you, and you feel their love as if they are loving you, but really you're just loving yourself. And when the fantasy goes away, you find that they can't love you at all. That can be a big disappointment if that's grown into a potential partnership, and suddenly it falls apart. So be aware of the fantasy devices that friends or lovers or others go in and out of, especially at work, perhaps, and just say, well, they're a fantasy of love and not really real, and I can't really maybe engage with them in relation to healing, okay? We say at the beginning of this webinar that Sosa is making a change to say if you heal and sway together, then they're putting you in a different class of dream, that if you don't heal and don't sway together and the healing goes mutual, you heal them and they heal you, and if you're in a cluster, you all heal each other and you all feel better. There has to be real love inspired in the heart, And the ones that want to use fantasy love are the dejects out of light wave society, because you can't fantasize about love. You have to open the heart and actually care for things. Opening the heart is a project all of its own, and sometimes you can't care for everything. That's a known truth, but people do care for each other in clusters, and then they can heal the ones they care for and leave the other ones alone. And that's how Sosa is organizing the dream stream, not just for light wave children, but light wave society. So when you find that somebody uses fantasy-based love, you be careful around them some and not get too close. Don't make them a lover, because that can shadow the infrastructure of your body. And know that if you come home very sick from an experience of a new beloved on a holiday weekend, that's a sign that they're not healing you. They're shadowing you somehow. That's not real love emerging out of their heart's being at all, and be gentle about that. That's a person you would not want to be with forever. With others that are just acquaintances, you can choose to heal or sway with them or not, and perhaps that's okay. But in any kind of circle of close proximity, you want the people in your home to love and sway with you or move on, because that won't work for you. That may be hard if you've been married or bonded a long time to someone who has suddenly seems to grow into some kind of fantasy that you can't handle, and that may be somebody to depart from through time, because it doesn't work for the infrastructure of your health, mindset, body, soul, or spirit. And so we'll speak about that too, because people like to throw fantasy realities around. Fantasy realities that are thrown at you or pitched at you shadow soul, and Sosa is making that illegal at this time. They want to foster the fantasy realities into the walls of all buildings and back into the television and lock them there. And in the movie theater, lock them there, because soul gets destroyed in movie theaters maybe more than anywhere else on earth, which is very weird to even think about. You went to a movie theater for a little entertainment and an interesting plot, and suddenly your soul dies. That wasn't true perhaps a year ago, but has grown to be true in light wave motion, not in all regions, but maybe half. So be careful of big movie theaters for now. If you want to watch something, perhaps watch it on your computer if you don't have a home theater system built. But whatever you do, be careful with it too, because the fantasy realities can blow you or your children or your family apart too, and you don't really need that in this time period. So until Sosa has a really good ordering for media-based energy systems, it's precarious. So be careful. It's better if you're alone not to have a theater system at home at all, if you don't need one. And if you do need to see something, the web does something else to the fantasy realities that they don't project out of the computer. So maybe that's a better place to watch your interesting movies or whatever it is you think you want to see. Dance hall theater or something beautiful and do it that way. There's another aspect of fantasies that we're going to explain to you, that people wear masks sometimes and not the fantasy shower around them. There's masks, there's God, and there's fantasy showers. And if you get caught in the fantasy shower, it's going to feel real because it seems like they really care. And if they run it actually long enough, you're going to start to get tired. So if somebody makes you very tired and you feel vampired due to the fantasy that they spin, what you do is you take off their garb, mask, and shower and put it away for another person they're going to display it at. And it is an action that can involve sosa, but you're just saying, I am not going to participate in your fantasy anymore and I'm going to turn it off. So you can think of it like a switch. I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm going to turn it off. The other thing that can happen in intimate experiences where you're falling in love and suddenly a fantasy shows up because she wants to be beautiful or he wants to be handsome and tall, and it just bolsters you right out of your body. That can make you sick with the flu after you depart the excursion. You can shut it off and work with them some if there's somebody that you really care about, to let go of that part of them that needs to run that fantasy to be near you. That can come up for all kinds of emotional reasons about dejection and loss of the heart and so on that they may have experienced. And when there's sincere love, there's a sincere sway. And then you heal one another when the fantasy emerges that's not true anymore. People can go back and forth between caring for something and running a fantasy. That's the difficult part of this current emerging light wave society, as people may think the fantasy is real love, but it isn't. And usually they run the fantasy out of fear or out of some part of themselves that got ruptured, or out of the belief that they need to be more than who they are, more beautiful than who they really are, and all of it is this really sad space where they just can't be themselves. So they run the fantasy to not be themselves because who they are is not accepted. Asur'Ana in her youth ran a lot of fantasy realities with her father, and later on she disbanded them all in her psychic work and got out of them because they left her feeling small. Then she came into herself and realized everybody should be their authentic self, and that was Shata's theme of DAS, which is be yourself and don't run fantasy realities and pretend to be something other than who you are. And in the school, there were still those that needed to run a fantasy, not just with Per and Asur'Ana, but maybe to present themselves as an adequate teacher or healer. That was sad for Shata to see, because a teacher should be authentic in themselves and just say what's true to them or true for others, and then it all works. Maybe it's hard for people in this civilization to be authentic, and that's a problem in light too. For yourselves, as Star sees, it's easy to dismantle all the stuff and be your authentic self, because That's the only way you feel really good about you, inside you, and feel true to you. If you're running a fantasy, you feel inside out and like you're bending over backwards to please someone else, and that's not a standard starseed pattern. If you're still running fantasies, I would be very surprised if you are for some cause. We'll help disband them, and you will find another dream stream in Castaneda to be with others that works for you in lieu of the fantasy, because this is really not good for your body, mind, or spirit. But it's such a societal way of being. It infiltrates the office, it infiltrates the shopping market, it infiltrates the airlines, it infiltrates everything. And so restaurants have their fantasies, and so does everything. The only thing to remember is you don't want to sit inside of the fantasy reality of an airline when you fly, or it may make you very tired or uncomfortable. So push it outside the plane and see if that doesn't help you, or push it into the walls of the airlines over the airports, which is what the kids are starting to do, and then you move that system that may be very injurious in light away from you. Many places have fantasies, and as the kids get around to it, much of it will shut off, and then it's hard to say what will happen to the addictive behavior people that just have to go to Nordstrom and Macy's in the US, or H&M and Zara in Norway. But wherever it is, they're addicted to going there because of a fantasy that they go into, and they feel better. When they spend money, then they get a better fantasy to feel even better. And so that is almost with any addiction to anything, whether it's food or shopping or even alcohol, because there's fantasies associated with alcohol. So make sure to shut that down, the fantasy of the wineries or the alcohol you prefer, and turn it off with a little switch, and don't be in the Bombay Sapphire gin fantasy of being somewhere and being intelligent, or whatever they add to their fantasy reality about gin. One of Asur'Ana and Pearl's students used to say, I drink gin and tonics, and I make sense to the people I'm talking to. I'm more intelligent on gin than anything else. That's part of the fantasy of gin. On rum, you get to be laid back and easy and go make love with somebody you perhaps shouldn't on a hard day of your heart. That's the rum delusion. The delusion of vodka is that you be mellow and be drunk and keep getting drunk until you can't remember anything. That's the vodka delusion. Then there's a delusion for tequila, which says that you're a tequila sequence of dream, which says I'm on holiday and I'll be merry and happy wherever I am and whatever I am doing, whoever I'm with. They're funny fantasies, but when you turn them off, the medicinal of the alcohol can aid you. Maybe some gin can really soothe the spine and the nerves. Rum can cause the spine to relax more, and tequila can heal the stomach and blood of certain bacteria that can show up in hot climates, in particular in light wave motion, that are not good for the body to have. So anyway, we're going to leave it at that for this moment. You understand that fantasy realities need to be placed back in the wall, and you don't need to use them or go into them if you don't wish to, which you don't because it's electrical and it hurts your field and soul. You also want to make sure to be true to you of everything that you're observing about yourself. Discharge your negative programming, let it go, and then see how you feel about the person you were disgruntled with. You may discover you don't feel disgruntled about anything at all, and you're at peace with it. And that it's better if you have to see them again, or have another encounter, or whatever it is that happened in the past can suddenly discharge and you feel better. In our own system of programming, we show you how they're layered. You can look at them and help discharge them as you find further layers of things you need to discharge in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Remember that any emotional loop you're in has a program associated, and get rid of it. If you need to make a life change, you need to let go of the social programming that is associated and bridge a new programming that takes you to where you're going next. And that's all for today. We bless you, we love you. Stand tall in your starseed truth and be well. Namaste. So 15.